Not looking anywhere. So, welcome back, grade 10s. We're looking at ideology, we're looking at capitalism, and I like these quotes here. So, there's a movie called The New World, and it's the story of Pocahontas, not the cartoon Disney version, but a version that has Christian Bale, and it's quite a great movie that sometimes we watch it in class. We didn't watch it this year, we watched Gandhi. We may end up watching it at the end of the course to kind of wrap up globalization. But there's a scene in it that after a winter of much suffering, Captain John returns back to Jamestown Colony, and he notices that many have died over the winter. During the winter, he'd been the prisoner of the Powhatan tribe, and that's where he gets to be introduced to Pocahontas. But when he goes back to the colony that he was meant to serve, and he notices that many of them have died. There's been great starvation, lack of food, lack of clean water, and he is given the responsibility, he's given the chain of command, he's given the responsibility to save the colony. And had Jamestown failed, then America doesn't happen. You know, the colony of Jamestown is like the birth of the story of America. So he recognizes that, you know, there's a lot of need. You know, they need to get a lot accomplished. And some of the men and children are not that disciplined. They're not that engaged in being part of the solution. So he has this quote: "He that will not work shall not eat. The labors of honest and industrious men shall not be consumed to maintain the idleness of a few." And in my mind, even though he said that 150 years before Adam Smith comes up with capitalism, that's capitalism. That's capitalism. He that will not work shall not eat. That's capitalism. Capitalism is about the invisible hand. You need to take care of you. Capitalism is the self-interest. That your self-interest is survival. So you need to find an economic niche. You need to do something of value for the community that you can exchange for the things you need. So if you want to eat, you're going to have to perform some kind of service. You're going to have to work. In capitalism, there's not meant to be any handouts. So he that will not work shall not eat. In my mind, that's the essence of capitalism. Self-interest, invisible hand. So, when we look at America, we look at the United States as being founded on rugged individualism. And capitalism is an ideology that is quite American. And I think we can see it all the way back here in 1609 in Jamestown. So that's kind of an introduction to what is capitalism. Capitalism is self-interest. Capitalism is about individualism. Capitalism is about you finding your niche, something of value that you can do so you can exchange that, whether it's a good that you produce or a service that you provide, you can exchange that in a market free of government to collect the things that you need to survive and the things you want to live the life that you dream of. And the example I always give goes to the tiki that we use for our fire drill. I don't know if you guys know the story about me, but I used to live in Hawaii. And I would surf at night, because you want to surf right around that blue hour, right? It's amazing surf. But during the day, I'd lay on the beach and I would make and sell these. And I used to try to sell them for $100 US on Monday, right? So on Monday, I'd have some sitting next to, my blanket, Waikiki Beach. It's a beautiful place. And guess what? Nobody would pay $100. So I don't eat. There's nothing. If I don't sell them, I don't eat. No one giving me anything. So Tuesday, I'm like, okay, $50. $50 for them. It's amazing. It's handcrafted. It's teak. Nobody bought them. So Wednesday, I haven't eaten in 48 hours. It's down to like $25 a little tiki guy, right? That's capitalism. I have to provide a product that people want at a price that they're willing to pay. And if I'm providing a product that is too expensive, it's not worth $100, or that nobody wants, then theoretically in capitalism, I must adapt or die. I need to adapt by lowering the price, or I start making something else. Instead of selling tikis, I sold something else that tourists want to buy on Waikiki Beach. Whatever that might be. I sold, what could it be? Maybe I was just, have you seen people like walk on those ropes? Maybe I got paid to do that. Maybe I was a mime. Maybe I could mime. So you have to do something that people want. If you don't adapt, you die. That's capitalism. So there's an overlap with social Darwinism that we just talked about. So we have two quick videos on capitalism we're going to look at that will take us up to lunch.
Good to see you. Hey, what's with the...
Good to see you.
What do you mean? Polka dots are out.
Commercials.
Capitalism is one of the most universally loved and hated economic social systems.
So there's a division of society. Who loves it? Probably those who are benefiting from it. If I'm worth $100 billion, I probably think capitalism is the ideology that we should shape the world on. That's the cornerstone. Greed, self-interest, invisible hand are the most sustainable cornerstones of a society. But if I'm somebody who's living in poverty and who can't seem to find the thing that others want to buy from me, then I might think that capitalism is a failed cornerstone. Is a cornerstone that's destined to lead to the implosion or the toppling of society. Now, who might say, oh, capitalism works? Probably those tall poppies, right? Because they're gifted genetically. They're probably going to be able to do something that people are like, wow, Connor McDavid, you're amazing. Here's $12.5 million, skate for me, right? I want to watch you skate. Wow, you can do stuff. Here's $12.5 million. But others don't have the natural gifts or they haven't had the training that he has. Nobody's paying me $12.5 million to watch me skate. I mean, you can if you want. You know, collect your money, pay me to skate. I can't use both feet when I skate. I don't figure that out. So my right leg kind of drags. That might be worth $12.5 million to watch me skate around. I'm really fast on one leg though. You're looking at me like, oh man, he's a fool. He can't skate with two. Yeah, I dragged the one, but I'm pretty fast, and I'm not kidding. I grew up in Beaver Lodge, and there are people that could like just skate like that. You can probably skate like that. I couldn't. I hated those guys. So this explains a lot about my animosity now. Because they had like those fancy skates. I had like skates that, in hindsight, they were goalie skates, and I didn't know the difference. And they're super dull, so that didn't help me skate on the edges or whatever you hockey guys would call it. But yeah, I don't know what it is. I couldn't do both at the same. I don't have the balance maybe. Were you at a point where you couldn't use both? You don't remember? I never got past that point. That's my hockey point. I'm not kidding. You guys might think I'm kidding, but I'm not. Then I just said, you know what, I guess I'm going to be a basketball star instead. So, can I make that basketball stuff do things? So yeah, capitalism. Who would like it? The tall poppies. Who won't like it? The people that can't do what's being expected. I can't do hockey. So if that's the thing that makes you rich, I'm going to hate it.
But where did it come from? Since about the 14th century, modern capitalism has been rapidly expanding its reach. Some would say that it has become a necessary competitive tool within a global economy and point to its success as a productive and innovative system.
So the proponents of it, the people who like it, the proponents of it, say, hey, look, it leads to innovation. Capitalism is based on competition. Competition leads to innovation. If we only had one company creating cell phones, there'd be no reason for it to be innovative. But because we have different companies, then what am I going to buy? Am I going to buy a Samsung? Am I going to buy an Apple? Or some other type of phone that I'm not really aware of right now? BlackBerry, do they still make them? Well, because there's competition, Apple, Samsung, and other companies, they need to do something special about their product to get your attention. It's like, hey, look, we have 6 cameras now. Woo! And you can take it underwater. What? I guess that's cool. The phone part is horrible. You know, you can't hear anybody you're talking to, but you don't want to talk to anybody anyways.
Others say that capitalism's end result causes class inequality, worker exploitation, and stifles freedom.
So that would be the negative side. Opponents. So the opposite of proponent is an opponent. Opponents don't like something. An opponent of capitalism says, you know what, it stifles freedom. It creates poverty. And you can see in places like Canada and the United States that with economic power, you can wield or yield political influence and power. So sometimes we'll give more credibility to the rich than we will do to the poor. So it's a threat to our economic power can become a threat to our democratic freedom. Because some people will be seen as, oh, they must have more insight because they're rich. Donald Trump will be a great president because he's a billionaire. Some flawed logic there.
Maybe they're both right, but what exactly is capitalism? Simply put, capitalism is a social and economic system where both the means of production and any associated trade are privately owned.
So it's a rejection of mercantilism. Mercantilism was the government had their hands on. Remember, the crown under mercantilism could decide who gets a charter. So Joey gets the exclusive right to have the fur trade in Western Canada. Joey has the Hudson Bay Company. Nobody else gets to be in there. There's no competition, no need for innovation. So mercantilism existed, and Adam Smith says that's stifling the wealth of the nation. We need to unleash the innovative potential of all people within the market. So therefore the market must be free of government control. So capitalism is a rejection of mercantilism. Capitalism is just free market. Free of what? Free of government.
This isn't the end-all, be-all definition of capitalism, but it does illustrate its tenets as opposed to other systems like socialism, communism, fascism, and a bunch of other isms. Generally, societies tend to be mixtures of different systems, and pretty much every country is a mixture. So why is capitalism so pervasive? Well, capitalism grew directly out of failed middle-age feudalism. Think of feudalism as a lot of tiny dictatorships. The lords would own land and set the rules. Serfs would live on that land and work the farms in exchange for protection by the lord. But since each system was self-contained, neither the lords nor the serfs had any incentive to work harder than they had to. A serf could never surpass a lord, and everyone was essentially set for life.
So one of the key things that we learned from the story of Andrew Carnegie was the concept of social mobility. Andrew Carnegie comes to the United States poor and becomes one of the richest Americans in history because of capitalism unleashes social mobility. Social mobility, I can go from one class to another. How do I go from a class of, a poor immigrant to an elite robber baron, one of the wealthiest Americans ever, because capitalism, because of opportunity. So he gets involved in a steel business, he ends up owning a steel business, and by selling steel, he becomes extremely wealthy. So capitalism allows for social mobility. Feudalism didn't. You're born a commoner, you die a commoner. So why would I work harder? My destiny is predetermined by the lottery of birth. I don't have to work harder. If, regardless of how hard you work here today, your future earnings were already predetermined, would you work as hard as you are? You're probably working hard because you want to see some kind of growth in your social status. Maybe you want to see more wealth. Maybe mom and dad don't have a Porsche 911, but you want one. Maybe you guys don't have a vacation home, an island, a Learjet. I don't know what it is that you want to consume, but that hunger to see some growth socially and economically is the catalyst for capitalists. Why am I working hard? A capitalist would say, so that I can become wealthier, so I can have a better life, because I define a good life with consumer goods.
In short, feudalism meant that there was no financial competition, and without competition, there was no reason to innovate technology or improve their society. So when the serfs finally had enough of being self-sufficient slaves and revolted, it left a new class of farmers competing with each other to sell the crops they had previously exchanged for land and protection. This was the birth of modern-day capitalist markets, and the quote, almighty dollar, which allowed serfs to become lords themselves if they were competitive enough in the marketplace. In turn, lords would pay their workers instead of offering housing and protection, transforming a collective into a system of individual self-responsibility. After entering the socio-economic system, capitalism spread like wildfire and became a part of nearly every country's policy-making process. Even materially poor third-world countries unable to establish free markets or private ownership strive for capitalist policy. To find out why capitalism became so attractive
and we are going to jump to the second video in a second. So, in essence, capitalism created a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift, meaning we were living a life this way, and then we're like, oh man, let's do something different. It's like a V-cut in basketball, a paradigm shift, a change in direction. We're going this way, we're like, oh man, let's cooperate, let's own things collectively, as a village. And then it's like, no, let's compete and own things individually as entrepreneurs. So it's a paradigm shift. It's a change of ideology. It's from collective existence, we, to individual existence, me. Under feudalism, and I've mentioned this before, but under feudalism, you were going to die in the same village that your great-great-great-grandparents were born. And you were going to die in the same village that your great-great-grandchildren would marry and find their offspring. So the village was really important to you, because your village was your identity. It really was the we. And under feudalism, you weren't really living for today, you were also living for the glory of heaven, of the afterlife. So under feudalism, a very church and village-centered society, it was the we that you were living for. But then there's a paradigm shift. They said, you know what, let's divide up the land and compete, not cooperate. And then those who can compete the best, adapt or die, will become wealthier and more powerful. So it's not a lottery of birth that decides on your power, it's your ability to adapt that decides your power. So you have people that are born poor that will die rich, or people that are born rich that may die poor. And many of these capitalists will end up becoming wealthier than the nobles of old. And that's why they're called robber barons, because a baron is a title of nobility, but they're robber barons, and it's a very critical term. They're robber barons because they're robbing the value of someone else. And we'll get into that after lunch when we look at socialism. So we'll let her finish up to look at capitalism for us.
Here we explained that capitalism grew out of the failure of middle-age feudalism. But why did it grow so quickly and pervasively as a social and economic system? Capitalism, in a nutshell, is the private ownership of the means of production combined with a free market system of trade. And while not everybody agrees with capitalism's effects on society, it's difficult to argue that capitalism doesn't have a massive impact on societies that implement it, which is also nearly all societies. So why is capitalism so successful? Essentially, capitalism grew to be what it is today because it is an attractive offer. It says that if you are able to outwit your competition, you'll get more money, and money can buy you more options.
So capitalism is attractive because you can improve your lot in life. Capitalism is attractive because there's this idea that if you work hard enough, that if you're innovative, if you adapt, you can become the tall poppy.
You don't have to work the fields anymore. Instead, you can pay people to do that for you. And that process incentivizes innovation and hard work. Of course, the dark side is that if you don't manage to outwit your competition, you may end up in a worse place than if you had never competed to begin with. That's the inherent basis of inequality and the source of most capitalist critiques. It also promotes financial gain as the most effective and sought-after tool for how we measure success. Now, many countries have attempted to combat the negative aspects of capitalism while promoting the positive. Socialist-leaning countries like Sweden are championed because they soften the blow of failing in a capitalist system for social welfare. Other countries attempt to remove capitalism entirely. The USSR, for example, suffered from a lack of incentive and subsequently used force as motivation. Countries that prioritize capitalism above social protections, like the United States, tend to suffer from some of the nastier side effects, like high rates of poverty and inequality. Clearly, capitalism comes with its pros and cons, as is the case with most political systems. Whether it is worth it or not will probably depend on your values and priorities. Since capitalism is a complex and interconnected system, there are millions of other angles and opinions we can't cover in 2 3-minute videos, or even a 3-month video.
All right, so she's introduced capitalism for us. Again, capitalism is about self-interest, it's about invisible hand, it's about finding your niche. It's finding something that you can take into a free market, like a farmer's market or a bazaar, and you can exchange it, something of value. So there's a need to be innovative. If everyone else is selling the same product as you are, if everyone's selling masks, then they're not going to pay more for your mask, or they might not even buy your mask. So your mask needs to be innovative. Maybe your mask is going to have a slogan on it that people are going to want. Or your mask is going to be more comfortable. Hey, there's a thought. Or your mask is going to be maybe even more effective. Now there's a thought too. So we have lots of people selling masks right now. Some masks are more expensive than others. And some masks are going unsold. So why are we willing to pay more money for some than others? Because we look at them as consumers and we see something of more value. For capitalists, the key to success in the future is to put out products and service of value. You may have to manufacture value. You may have to falsely create the illusion of value. But in the end, the consumers have to be willing to pay you money for it. So that's capitalism. After the lunch break, we'll look at socialism and Marxism, and then no doubt we'll have a little bit of time for you to just kind of sit back and absorb what we've talked about today and try to get ready for the question and answer review on Monday.